Welcome to Punching Weight, where we celebrate the weird, ambitious, and unnecessary. And on this episode, we won't be talking about games, but a very special, very unnecessary peripheral, the N64 Mouse. Yes, the Nintendo 64 had a mouse. It is real, it is official, it is beautiful, and I have no idea if any games actually use the damn thing. So, I have my bag, and we're going to test. You probably never knew the Nintendo 64 even had a mouse, and that's because it was neither sold by itself or sold outside of Japan. Similar to the Super Nintendo mouse, it was packaged with a game, Mario Artist. Mario Artist was basically a sequel to Mario Paint, but was exclusive to the Nintendo 64 DD, the disc-based add-on to the system that sold very poorly and never left Japan. But while the Super NES mouse was available separately in certain parts of the world, the N64 mouse is only available with copies of Mario Artist, and unlike Mario Paint, Mario Artist did not go on to sell a few million copies. So, flat out, not many Nintendo 64 mice exist. The idea of a console system having a mouse may seem odd today, but they were more common than you'd maybe think. Like we mentioned above, the SNES had a mouse packaged with Mario Paint, but was compatible with a handful of other games like Wolfenstein 3D. The PlayStation 1 mouse made games like Clock Tower, Alien Resurrection, and Quake 2 a considerably better experience, and the Sega Dreamcast not only had a mouse, but a keyboard too. Who needs a PC? I got the Dreamcast mouse and keyboard for Quake 3 Arena Online. Don't at me. I wanted to do this video because there's just not a whole lot of information about the N64 mouse out there, and after receiving a very generous donation, thank you Mr. McMuscles, I was duty-bound to do the heavy research myself. So, I got my games, I got the mouse, let's see what this weird, let's be honest, unnecessary peripheral can actually do. Oh, and because I've become something of a connoisseur of console mice lately, I'll be using my PlayStation mousepad. Okay, let's get started, and there is no better place to start than with Mario 64. Let's go.
Press start to play.
Mario 64. I love messing with Mario's face. Uh-oh. No start button. I can't actually start. This is not a good start for the N64 mouse. I was able to trick the game by plugging in an actual controller and then swapping out for the mouse. Okay, let's do this. Alright. Movement is actually pretty good. This thing is really sensitive, except I can't really walk. I had no idea what to expect, but it looks like the mouse emulates the analog stick, so dragging the mouse emulates holding the stick in a certain direction, which makes it really hard to actually go anywhere. My burger fell off. And the right and left buttons look to emulate A and B. So that means I can get around by jumping and kicking. Yeah, look out world, it's jump kicking Mario, ready to save all princesses. Oh no, my greatest foe, a pit! I have no doubt that a Mario 64 superfan could play this whole game while just jumping and kicking, but I can't. So it's not really possible to play the game, but the mouse technically works. Let's do another early title, Wave Race 64, one of my personal favorites. I remember seeing that water for the first time and thinking graphics can't get any better than this. It's still a fine looking game if you ask me.
Wave Race.
Jumped into the training stage to get my feet wet, and found the controls were pretty good. This thing is really responsive.
To start racing, select Start the Race from the pause screen menu.
But I ran into another problem. I can't leave the training stage and start an actual race because I don't have a start button to access the menu. I'm already noticing a pattern here. But when I got into the race, it wasn't too bad. The turning took some getting used to, but I was still able to get first place, though it's a little embarrassing to miss that many points on Sunny Beach.
Don't miss any more.
Again, looks like it's compatible but only uses the analog stick and A and B buttons. But Wave Race isn't as complicated of a game, so it's more compatible than Mario. Okay, the other system launch title, Pilot Wings 64. This game has more variety with each vehicle controlling a little different. Hang glider is just steering and landing, it's no problem with the mouse. Movement on the rocket belt is a little tough. The gyrocopter is impossible to turn around in. Birdman has a similar problem with turning around since you just can't hold the stick. Again, great precision. I always had the problem of overcorrecting in this game, and the mouse mitigates that, but it's overall not quite a better way to play. Okay, enough messing around. Let's get to the heavy hitters. Zelda Ocarina of Time, does it have special compatibility? And nope. Turned it on and it straight up said no controller. It didn't even register it, but using a controller and swapping when the game started let me use the mouse. So again, it's compatible, but with just light analog stick movement and the A and B buttons. This got me thinking, there are a handful of N64 games that exclusively use the D-pad instead of the analog stick. Mischief Makers is one such game, and sure enough, it's no dice. I can grab and jump, and that's all. Shake, Marina. Shake it, Marina. I want you to shake it so bad. Why won't you shake? Can't get her to shake anything. Yoshis Story. Didn't even recognize the mouse. But again, starting with a controller and swapping seems to get around that problem. Yoshis Story controlled pretty well, but without the Z button, there's no way to shoot eggs, so it's basically unplayable. Okay, so I'm starting to see a pattern. Games that registered the mouse, and even those that didn't register it right away, did so as though it were a normal controller, but a controller with only the A and B buttons and the analog sticks. So in a way, maybe all games for the N64 do support the mouse. They're just basically unplayable due to the lack of buttons. That pretty much removes any game that requires the Z button or exclusively uses the D-pad. But that just means we gotta get creative. Wave Race worked because the analog stick was for steering instead of actual movement. So let's try out a few more racing games. The most appropriate game for this video, Mickey's Speedway USA. Hey, it's a mouse controlling a mouse. And it controls pretty well. Again, the sensitivity is really nice on this thing, but there's no way to use weapons, which makes it not ideal. And I bet Mario Kart works the same way. Yep, it's about what I expected. No way to use items or power slide. Shame, because the control's pretty good. These games have too many buttons, that's why Wave Race works, so let's go with something a little more simpler. F-Zero X. This is actually pretty great. The control is amazing, but it's tough to take hard turns. And the lack of shoulder buttons means you won't be able to lean in for tight turns and would make the later tracks pretty much impossible. Nah, we gotta get simpler. Beetle Adventure Racing. Oh man, this game's great. And in the grand scheme of things, a much simpler game. It's just accelerate, brake, and handbrake. That is if you're driving automatic. Controls really well, managed to finish the first level in first place and get a lot of the secrets. Wide turns are still a struggle, and if I ever needed to shift into reverse or reset myself on the main road, I wouldn't be able to. But I was still able to maneuver around corners with just accelerate and brake. I'm sure selecting the car with the higher handling helped too, but overall, one of the more compatible games so far. Further proof that Beetle Adventure Racing is one of the best games on the system. We should move on to other genres, but racing games so far are the most compatible with the mouse. Starcraft 64, here we go. This was the game that spurred this whole video. I read online this game is totally compatible with the mouse, and it was released after Mario Artist, so maybe this is genuinely compatible with the mouse? Man, this is disappointing, but it's just like any other N64 game. The point and click feels great, but the interface is different than it is on the PC. Clicking onto units doesn't bring up the option to construct things. All that is done exclusively with the C buttons, and with no C buttons available, there's no way to build units or buildings, which basically means a big fat nope. Same thing for Command and Conquer. No Z button means you can't access the menu to build anything. It's a shame because the clicking and dragging feels so much better than it does on a controller. Oh no, the lack of a Z button makes it not compatible? Oh god, say it isn't so. No, Pokemon Snap. You'd be so good with a mouse. I want to take a picture of you, Pikachu. I want to take a picture of you so bad, Pikachu. Are there controller options? Z button setup, that's it? Man, this is legit bumming me out. This game should have mouse support. We just need a sequel to this game already. Now wait a minute though, controller options. There's one game I know of that lets you customize your controls any way you want, Doom 64. You'll need to use a controller to navigate the menus, but mapping forward, use, and run to the right click and shoot to the left click is great. Holy crap, you can even change the look sensitivity. The only problem is you can't change weapons. Whoops, so I don't want that chainsaw. And you can't strafe. But I'm sure it's possible to beat Doom 64 with only a shotgun, and I'm pretty sure there are plenty of Doom superfans out there that could beat this game with just the mouse, no problem. Alright, so that cheers me up a little after Pokemon Snap. Doom 64 turns out to be a rare breed. No other FPS since I had available had that amount of controller customization, so Duke 3D, Quake, James Bond, The World Is Not Enough are straight up not compatible because you cannot move shoot to a button other than Z. Though it only proves once again that Doom 64 is absolutely one of the best shooters on the system. However, there's at least one more shooter that doesn't use Z for attack, Hexen 64. By default, A and B are attack and jump respectively. If you don't mind dragging the mouse forward to walk forward, it's not too bad. You won't be able to look up and down or select and use items though. Still a viable way to play Hexen. I mean, if you like playing Hexen, which I don't. But you know what made Quake 2 and Alien Resurrection great on the PlayStation 1 was the ability to use a separate controller in tandem with the mouse. If there were a game with a dual controller support, you could just swap out one of the controllers for the mouse. And I happen to know 2 specific games that have dual controller support: Goldeneye and Perfect Dark. It's possible you didn't know this, but with 2 controllers plugged in, both Goldeneye and Perfect Dark give you the option to play the single-player levels with 2 controllers. It's the closest to dual analog controls on these old games on an actual N64. You first have to put in a second N64 controller so that you can choose the 2 controller options. Pick 2.4 style, unpause the game, swap the mouse on the controller in slot 1, and bam! You are playing Goldeneye or Perfect Dark with a keyboard mouse setup with legit controllers on the legit hardware. But before you get too excited, it doesn't quite control how you'd think. The look is only ever solely mapped on the first player stick. Walk/turn and look/strafe are split between the 2 controllers for the other options. This is a nice reminder that console FPS controls wouldn't be perfected until later. And you can't remap shoot, it's always on Z, so I had to learn to shoot with my left hand. There's also no way to adjust look sensitivity, which by default is really slow. And finally, because the start button on the second controller doesn't function for some reason, accessing the menu will require you to unplug the mouse and plug the controller back in, which makes selecting gadgets on Goldeneye a pain. Still, it's the closest you can get to keyboard mouse style gameplay without emulation. You can do some pretty incredible things with the Game Shark, so I'm sure there's some way to hack Goldeneye to make it work better with the mouse. So if there's any hackers out there, get cracking, because maybe one day we'll be able to use this mouse like we ought to be using it. And it don't stop there, there are 3 more dual controller games I know of for the N64. First, Robotron 64. This is an actual dual joystick shooter and can be played with either 1 or 2 controllers. Psst, you could do the same thing on the NES version of Smash TV. And the mouse works great. Set the controller into port 1 and the mouse into port 2, set up the options as such, and go to town. The only real issues are accuracy, which isn't super important in a game where you can only shoot in 8 directions, and consistent fire, but the mouse is pretty sensitive by default, so it isn't too much trouble to keep firing. This may be the single most compatible game for the N64 mouse, but it isn't anything you can't already get with just another controller. Next, we have Sin and Punishment. This is an import game, by the way, and this one is tragic because while this game does support dual analog controllers, it doesn't offer enough customization to properly utilize the mouse. Now, you'd hope you'd be able to play the same way you play the sequel on the Wii, with the Wiimote aiming and the nunchuck moving, but the only controller option that moves fire off of the Z button also remaps movement to the Z and R buttons, so shooting feels great, but movement is basically impossible, rendering the game basically unplayable with the mouse. So close. And lastly, Star Wars Episode 1 Racer. Now, this is pod racing? Hidden behind a code, there's an option to play with 2 controllers, one in slot 1 and the other in slot 3, oddly enough. It lets you control each pod individually, so like some kind of virtual on racing game. This means it's the only game that could conceivably be controlled by 2 mice, making it possibly the dumbest way to play any video game. Oh, those Star Wars prequel movies just keep giving, don't they? But for dual controller games, those are the only 4 that I know of. At this point, I'm really running through my collection. I started double checking any game made after Mario Artist was released just to see if they would magically recognize the mouse. Conker, Majora's Mask, Paper Mario, and I had no luck. In the end, I tested about 30 games with the Nintendo 64 mouse and came back pretty much empty-handed. Now, that's not every game on the system and not even my entire collection, but it was a pretty good sample size. Again, technically every game might work with the Nintendo 64 mouse. There might be something out there that uses it better than Robotron, Doom, Wave Race, and Beetle Adventure Racing. So to wrap up, a true showstopper, Superman 64. That's right, start at the top, gotta finish at the bottom. Could the precision of the N64 mouse make this game good? The world needs to know.
Then there's no time to waste.
Nope, still sucks. Thanks for watching! Stop Skeletons from Fighting is a Patreon-supported show. Huge shout out to all our radical patrons here. Want to see your name here or get cool perks like early access to new videos, the SSFF Discord, and behind-the-scenes stuff? Head on over and pledge what you can. Thanks again for watching. Stay powerful.